Welcome back to another edition. I'm going to explore on this podcast the idea of dying broke. I did a column on this, oh, several months ago, and then did this as an interview on South Dakota Public Broadcasting, which um, was hosted by Lori Walsh, who is a phenomenal interviewer, by the way. And I do have a list of all of those interviews. I do one a month for them, and that's would be on my website if you're interested. So I thought this would be worth talking about from a financial therapy perspective, um, because as a financial planner, I run across the term "I'd like to die broke," which typically means I'd like to spend my very last penny, um, the same moment that I take my very last breath. And what's behind that is a vision of completely enjoying and spending the funds that a person has worked a lifetime to accumulate on creating experiences and memories for themselves, their families, their friends in the final years, decades of their life, and not having left money on the table, air quotes. Because there is the thinking that, well, if I die with an estate, if I leave a lot of money for my heirs or charity or somebody else to enjoy, that's money I could have been using on myself. And so there can be a sense of loss around that. Maybe a fear that I missed out, a little FOMO going on. I could have had some additional trips. I could have purchased that brand new car that I always thought about, or I could have given more to my kids in their lifetime. And that's real. I mean, that's true. If we leave anything when we pass on, it's money that we didn't spend. Now, doing that can be incredibly difficult because, I mean, it's really easy. If you know when you're going to die, it's pretty easy. You just work the numbers backward and it's simple. But of course, none of us know when we're going to die. Now, some of you may be saying, well, in states and countries that have end of life provisions where a person who's terminal can actually know the day that they're going to die. Yes, that's true. In some cases you could, but typically you're not going to know that 10 years, 20 years, 5 years, 3 years, even 1 year in advance. I think part of us, another complicating factor in that we don't know exactly when we're going to die. I mean, we can get close from a scientific standpoint and a mortality table standpoint with things like living to100.com, realage.com, that can give us kind of a clue when we might pass on. I have taken those, and I think at one time I was up to around 97, 98. And after COVID is taken off about 4 or 5 years, now I'm 92 or 93, which is rather interesting. So you can do those types of things, but still, we don't know. And the other thing that we really focus on, which would be an optimism bias, that we are going to probably not, we'll be able to, the fact that we'll be able to live our life factoring, this is how much I can spend, here's the year I can go to zero, and typically we have no healthcare costs factored into that. And we know that healthcare costs can really balloon in the last years of life. I've talked about long-term care and the costs associated with that. I've certainly written about it. I have clients spending $10,000 to $20,000 a month on assisted living. So this is reality. This is not something that our brains get a lot of enjoyment or gratification on focusing on, because there's so much fear and anxiety involved in living our last days in poor health, a poor mental state, needing extreme assistance from other people. There's no wonder that the underlying fear of outliving our financial resources is overshadowed by more pleasant thoughts of enjoying retirement. So this kind of brings me into what I want to talk about, in that the second version of dying broke is the more likely reality of dying broke because of healthcare costs, and not anticipating those costs. So this is one huge reason when your financial planner says, yes, you've got a 90-95% chance of living to this age, and you look at the projected amount that's left and wonder, well, why leave that much on the table? There's a lot of technical answers to that, but to have a high probability of never running out of money, you almost inherently have to leave some money on the table to account for hiccups. So dying broke is a real unfortunate issue with so many people. And I had read a series of articles in the New York Times in November of 2023. And it was a joint project of the Times and the KFF Health News, which really looked at the intricate, expensive, really confusing web of the long-term healthcare industry. And it's just so easy for us to overlook the financial strain caused by long-term care expenses. Like I said before, because the personal stories of enjoyment in retirement are much more memorable and much more attractive. So there's a lot of anxiety, a lot of fear of the unknown complexities of long-term care. And it's just not something that our brains gravitate toward as, wow, this is really joyful. This is really happy. I think I'd really rather be spending this money on making memories and not think about the reality that I may spend my last years unable to make realities and in a condition that I would really prefer not to be in. And it's going to cost a lot of money. According to Home for Mom, more than 55 million adults in the U.S. who are over age 65, of those, we got over 55 million that are over 65. 1.3 million live in nursing homes, and that's 2.3% of the elderly population. And there's an additional almost 1 million that reside in assisted living facilities. So that brings us up to 3-4% of the adult population over 65 that are in these facilities. And just by way of reminder, an assisted living facility is different from a nursing, what we used to call nursing home. It's skilled care right now. But there's assistance that's given in all of these with daily tasks like dressing, bathing, and managing medication. One of the interesting things I found in my research on this is that assisted living facilities are actually quite profitable. A recent industry survey showed that half of the operators of assisted living centers see profitability of 20% or more. And when you compare that to other health sectors, that is much more profitable. So this is kind of a conundrum, and it's a conundrum for me because I don't believe profits are bad. I believe profits are absolutely needed for any business to be sustainable. But one of the reasons that I believe that the profits are so high is because the supply is so low. If you're aware at all of these facilities and have done any research, you will probably discover very quickly that almost every assisted living center and every skilled nursing facility has a waiting list. Getting a room can be very difficult, and it can be even worse if it is a independent living, elderly living facility, which means you don't need any help with dressing, bathing, managing medications, etc. There's one in my town that has had up to a 5-year waiting list to get in. So this comes as a real surprise and is one of the costs of just putting our heads in the sand emotionally and not dealing with preparation for long-term care. And I've talked about this before. I think I had a podcast on the tale of two families, one where the parents prepared and one where the parents didn't prepare for long-term care. So there can be what I'm saying is the cost can be pretty high because the supply is low and the supply of workers willing to do this work, which is grueling work in many cases. It takes a heart full of love for someone to be a nurse or an attendant in a healthcare facility. And I'm not saying every attendant has a heart full of love. So these facilities are in short supply. Therefore, right now, they're pretty profitable and their charges are pretty extensive. Most assisted living facilities in my area charge from $4,500 a month for an individual to over $10,000 a month for a couple. And on top of that are additional charges. So we can really fall into anchoring when we look at these fees and we see, okay, the base monthly fee is $4,500, $5,500, whatever it may be, and then not realize all of the additional charges that can be on top of this. So sometimes there can be just a reluctance to ask questions. There can be a naivete on the behalf of many of us, and myself included, that when a price is quoted, I make up a story that's it. It's kind of like saying, well, buying the horse costs $2,000. Okay, I can afford that. And what we don't explore is that keeping the horse, stabling it and feeding it's going to cost $500 to $1,000 a month. Throw in some vet bills. So we need to work not to anchor on the initial fees. There's services like therapies, medication distribution, that are all tiered. So there's many tiers of service. And at a facility that my parents are in, they reassess these fees every 6 months. And even if the facility says that they're all inclusive, they still may have add-on fees that can increase that monthly bill by hundreds, even thousands of dollars. So again, the anchoring bias really causes us to focus on the initial costs without considering this cumulative effect of all the fees. And this can lead to a lot of surprise. It can lead to just a feeling of overwhelm or helplessness when either the senior themselves are confronted with these bills or the family is. At some point in time, you're probably not going to be able to pay your bills, to cognitively go through a bill and understand it. And that task is going to land to someone else, either a family member or someone that you've hired. Take just getting dressed. There's fees that can be charged for both helping someone dress in the morning and another fee in helping them undress at bedtime. Bathing is another area that you need to pay attention to when you're exploring the fees of an assisted living center. There's varying fees. One, if you want full assistance with showering, or a lower fee if you want someone just to be present while showering. Um, there's also incontinence care where fees can vary for aid with various tasks like sitting, standing, wiping, changing adult diapers. Okay, I know that's not what you tuned into this podcast to really be energized about, but this is reality that our minds just want to put that away because of the anxiety, the discomfort, the embarrassment of addressing it. And that's what can come back to really bite us financially, is not paying attention to those details. And then let all of the hidden costs add to all of the anxiety and frustration experienced by families. I've been approached by families of my financial planning clients just worrying that mom or dad had enough money to be paying all of the bills. They see $10,000, $20,000 a month going out for assisted living services and can become quite anxious. And kind of a side note to that, typically I have privacy, well, typically always I have privacy notices or agreements with my clients. And if someone calls and asks me if mom or dad has enough money to afford something, if they are not a trusted contact or power of attorney or someone that I've been given permission to reveal that data to, I'm in a very uncomfortable position of saying, I'm so sorry, I can't disclose that information to you. So we talked about that, the importance of having active powers of attorney, trusted contacts, bringing children in on financial planning meetings is so important. Okay, back to the topic. Additional medical expenses that could also catch you off guard is medication management. Okay, you could get a reminder, which doesn't cost as much as actually someone giving you your medications. There could be charges for on-site pharmacy. I know one thing we've been surprised is that the assisted living center that my parents are at, excuse me, all over-the-counter medications have to come through their approved pharmacy. So you can't go out to Walmart and buy Advil for them and bring it in. It's completely verboten. So it's got to go through the pharmacy. Well, what do you guess the prices are? I've seen double on medications easily of what the costs are at any other store. There's fees for treating temporary wounds, fees for treating an illness. There's fees for blood pressure monitoring, blood glucose monitoring, insulin injection. I mean, and some of these fees can be bundled, but you need to know which ones are bundled and which ones aren't. So this is so important to address and get a handle on, to help with the anxiety in managing someone's health care in their latter years. Now, there's countries that do manage to keep a pretty tight leash on out-of-pocket costs and will provide this service as free. What I have found out, and I'm thinking of the Scandinavian countries, a lot of these countries that offer this type of long-term health care free also have a much higher tax system. So when I do the math on this, I find that the U.S. actually has pretty overall lower costs than many, many other countries when you combine the taxes along with any premiums and out-of-pocket costs. And this is something I just rarely see reported when we're talking about health costs, when we're talking about Denmark having a great social net and no out-of-pocket costs for health services. You also don't see that, and by the way, tax rates start at 40% for the lowest income earner as opposed to 12% in the United States. So I just want to sum this up by saying that even for people with financial resources, negotiating our long-term healthcare system is not easy. It is unbelievably difficult. Sometimes it's, again, not about the money. You can have all the money in the world to pay for this stuff, but the issues with long-term care runs pretty deep with a super lack of coordination between emergency rooms, assisted living centers, primary care doctors, specialists. There is no one person coordinating this unless it is typically a family member. And while there's more and more people getting into the business of being advocates, they are expensive and few and far between. So dying broke just is not a great alternative. We need to plan. We need to address those fears of starting to set aside money when we're very young to take care of ourselves in older age. Healthcare costs, we know, have been rising. And it's just can be really difficult for the brain to say, well, let's put aside some money to fund a potential long-term care plan, to have several $100,000 set aside to pay for assisted living for the last 2 years of our life, rather than enjoying that today. But what is the cost? What's the alternative? The alternative is our money running out. And most people think they're going to die long before they actually will. It seems to be a bias baked into our brains that that's one reason we start Social Security at an early age, that for 60% of people, if you start at 62, you'll be leaving money on the table. But we're thinking, I want to get all that I can get for myself. I don't want to leave anything on the table. So we kind of flip on something like this and pay no attention to the fact of what's it going to look like? What's it going to look like for me when I can't take care of myself, and how am I going to be able to afford it? So by recognizing these biases and fears, we can hopefully better understand the challenges and complexities of planning for long-term health care, emphasizing better preparation and really preparing ourselves emotionally to take those steps. Thanks for listening.